Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rocky here with Father Bonica 6. And Father, I want to have a discussion that we kind of hit upon at the end of the last episode. And then rather than me doing the mistake I had done for basically the entire month of October, asking you a brand new question that would have not been able to answer within the episode, I wanted to start the new episode with that question. And that is kind of going off the theme that we talked about relating, keeping our eyes open, and being honest with ourselves of where we are at. In the last episode, we discussed about how Jesus was always willing to tell the truth to everyone. Sure, he had different ways of communicating, but he didn't care where you were at in your life, whether you were the richest person and thought you were all that and everything, or whether you were literally a pariah and a leper that people were actively avoiding. He would be willing to teach you and to be with you. And I bring up that whole spectrum because we have talked many times about how there are parts of us within ourselves that we don't want to address or acknowledge. Maybe we're not proud of them, maybe we're not confident in them, and we just want to have that part be ignored. And we were hitting upon the fact that once you go through an experience, whether you have overcome it in the way that you wanted to, or you just went through it and it's the same, but at least you saw an attempt of addressing a personal flaw that you wanted to overcome. Too much anxiety, too much fear, insecurity, whatever. And going through that makes you much better at being able to relate to someone else who's going through that. But the first step is recognizing yourself in an honest, genuine, and gentle way. And I wanted to discuss that second part about how to then take what I've learned about myself, have confidence that I'm not weird, that this is what actually happens when you're going through X situation, and how you can be helpful to someone else. I get that in some ways, this is like, well, why are you bringing this up? Everyone knows how to do this. But I honestly believe it's like one of these things that no, you don't, because it never gets talked about, and it's something that should be. So sorry for the very long setup, but that's kind of where my head was at entering into to this day.
And I might need to go back and forth on that a little bit to clarify what you have in mind. But the one thing that comes to mind is just to honor what you said there, that this isn't immediately obvious to everyone. I remember reading an introduction to the autobiography of St. Teresa of Avila, and the biographer noted that it's one thing to go through things. It's another thing to know what you're going through. It's another thing to be able to talk about it. And she had the unique gift to do all three. She went through, he was talking in particular about growth in the spiritual life, but I think that applies to a lot of areas in our lives. It's one thing to go through them. It's one thing to know what we're going through or to understand it even after the fact. And then it's another thing to be able to express it, to be able to talk about it. So no, it's not immediately obvious to everyone. And not everyone is going to have the same facility in doing all of that. So now I would add, it's one thing to go through something. Another way that we gain experience is by being with others as they go through something. So either directly or vicariously, we can get experience about different things. So every psychologist does not need to have every psychological disorder to be helpful about it. How do they become helpful? Well, in some cases, they read summaries of what people went through, but we get even better when we actually are with people as they're going through it. And then certainly our own personal experience of going through something is has even more data, I suppose, to work with, because we may not think to ask all the questions or understand all of what somebody else is going through, but we can always keep accessing our own experience as we understand different facets of it. So then let me just propose a starting point, and then you can tell me where to go more deeply or how to elaborate on it. When we go through something, I might even look at something like Alcoholics Anonymous really leverages this, and someone who goes through the steps can acknowledge first of all, and they give testimonies to each other in an AA meeting of maybe what their life was like and how things fell apart. And learning how to give a testimony is already a learned skill. What do I pay attention to in a testimony? What do I need to share with someone else? And of course, AA meetings, the structure, the template is provided by other people's testimonies. I've heard other people say, um, I haven't been to AA meetings, but anyway, this is one of these vicarious experiences I'm sharing with you. Someone has heard someone else say, well, I had these issues. I started addressing them, and, drinking that had these consequences. I was in this position, and then I realized, I was powerless, and was able to come to a meeting, and then things went from there. So we sort of learn by example of how others do it is a first point that I'm making. And then I start to pay attention to my own experience based on the kinds of things that other people found important in their experience. Somebody giving a testimony about gaining sobriety after suffering from the consequences of alcoholism is probably going to include a lot of the consequences of alcoholism in their story, is going to include probably the person that intervened with them, and then the meeting that they started to go to, and then maybe their sponsor. And there's a kind of regular set of things that we cover when we share about an experience like that. Somebody in your own situation, to take a more positive experience, perhaps, who grows a business. What are the steps that you took to grow a business? And how did you come to those steps? Those are two different things. You did step 1, 2, 3, 4. Why did you do that? Well, I don't know. You kind of followed your nose. People with intuition can often make good decisions and not really be aware of why they made good decisions. But maybe thinking about it, or maybe somebody asking them the question, leads them to reflect on, well, I'm glad I did step 1, 2, 3, 4, because step 1 led to step 2 in this way, step 2 led to step 3 in this way, and then I had to correct something in step 4 and so you figure it out as you go, as you look back on it, and you kind of open up and understand why you did what you did, and then you can sometimes share that with people.
Yes, and I love the framework in which you're laying down for here of acknowledging what you're going through is a different skill set than talking about what you went through versus actually going through it. Those are three different components there, because as you bring up the example of my businesses, as I mentioned before, I've made a lot of them. And you're right. In the beginning, the first couple were just I need to make a check today. I know if I buy another rental property, I'm going to be able to get paid from this tenant if everything goes right. And then a couple years later, it was like, well, let's actually analyze what went in that process. Why did we buy that house? Why was that tenant selected? So on and so forth. And then it was like, well, actually, how can I make this better instead of just rinse and repeat? Because I was in the same trap that many, many business owners are, is we just got to get through today. We just got to make the day work, and never really actually looked at the process. So I would argue that I didn't even know what I was experiencing. I was just running around with my hair on fire constantly. And it was going back and really evaluating, what did we do? What did we do want? Was really a skill set in which you taught me through the context of morality here, of, sitting back and actually analyzing. You gave the context of ourselves. Where are we at right now? What does our relationship with God actually look like? And what do we want it to look like? And you don't do that just by keep going the same route every single day without stopping yourself and truly being evaluated. Do a self-audit. And that is what I did with my business. That would have been, years ago now, 21, I guess. And what I have found was, all right, there were some great things we were doing. There were some things that we're doing that were at best waste of time, at worst really hurting us. And then let's just streamline it. And then once we figured that out, it was, well, this actually will apply to way more than just a real estate business. And then I was able to jump and grow from there and accordingly and help a lot of people out, because in the process of me analyzing it, I had to teach myself it and figure out how I would talk about it. And then I had to start doing it to my employees, which by default made me have to figure out how to be expressive at it. And then I just did the process again. When I told it to them, how much did it actually work? What way of communicating was effective and what wasn't? And then now I'm at a point where I literally just help business owners that hate the relationship with their business. Maybe it's not as much they love what they're doing anymore and they'd rather just walk away. And, we're here to say it's okay that you don't have the same passion, but let's not have all your guys lose their jobs. Let's figure out a way where we can keep it all going. And that's really what my life is now. I mean, I still have real estate portfolios and all that stuff, but my life is really helping businesses live after the business owner doesn't care anymore, for lack of a better way of saying it. So I find tremendous joy in it, but it all came from this skill set that you said here. And not to go on a whole self thing about my business, but that was what you said, is that in the beginning, we were just trying to keep the thing so we could pay the electric bill. And then it became, let's pause. We don't need to be going 24/7 on this. Let's pause and actually look at the business. What is right? What is wrong? What were decisions we made? Not blaming, just what happened? How do we get there? Why was good, bad? And then so on and so forth in terms of how we just got to where I was at. And again, didn't think I was going down that direction today, but I think that's something that I wanted to bring up, the concept that you expressed so beautifully, that these are the 3 steps. And when you get to the end, regardless of whether it's building a business or surviving a trauma, whatever that trauma may be, AA being an example there, how do we move forward and make our lives better, and how that can be helpful to someone else? And I think that this is the part that I want to conclude on, because the one thing that I have seen throughout my 30 odd years on this planet is that you can get great happiness accomplishing things by yourself. But what is really ends up being the most beneficial thing is when you're helping someone else. And yeah, the way you go and help someone might be different than the way they expected or the way someone else wants you to. But seeing that the results happen as a group tend to be much greater than doing it yourself. And I think that that's the true fruition of going through this process of, what am I going through? Okay, what was that actually? And now how do I tell someone about it? So, Father, I know I just went for a very long part of talking there, and it's not normally how the show goes, but I want to give you a chance to respond here, as we have about 3 or 4 minutes left in the episode.
Yeah, sure. I love what you said, and I think your own witness is a really good one. So glad that you shared it. And I guess just one more thing to be aware of that comes to mind is, of course, everybody's journey is not the same. So we have to be careful. Sometimes the zeal to help somebody else succeed in the way that I've succeeded leads me to kind of put my process on them. And, if you said the only way to create a business is to take these 4 steps, and then I need to force you into the 4 steps that I took. Of course, that's, it might work every once in a while, but anyway, primarily it's not going to work. So that's where I think there's a distinction between witness. What are the steps that I took? And as far as I understand, what do those steps mean? Because the reality is we're not even aware of all of the factors that made your 4 steps work and would not make somebody else's 4 steps work. And that could be because you're in Pittsburgh, because you have this much equity to start with, because you have these business partners, because it was, the stock market was at this place at that time of, anyway, there are a lot of factors we're not necessarily realizing are making a bigger difference than we think that they are. And so we have to be careful about that. Of course, also, you have a particular temperament, you have particular gifts, you have particular strengths. And so you're able to do with joy and energy. And in fact, these things are energizing for you, certain things. Other people will not be the same as that. And so that's an important thing to realize. But then from that perspective, to give a testimony can inspire. And there may be some things that click in somebody's heart. And they say, oh, yeah, that's a great step to take. That would be really useful for me. And then also to listen to somebody, the way that you hear their story may help you to say, well, what about this? Or what about this? And we can lead people to a process of discovery, which is their process of discovery. And yet, because we have some insight, we know how things work because we've been down those paths. We sort of know what questions to ask or what areas to explore. It's like if you lose your keys in your house, you know at least what places to look for. Now, I don't know what all the closets and desk drawers are in your house, but I have a feeling keys have a way of making their way into closets and desk drawers or whatever. And so we can ask the questions that'll lead people to the discovery, which has to be particular to their situation. And so those are some ways that we can safeguard against projecting our own experience and trying to put that on somebody else to repeat our experience as if that's the only way to go through something.
And Father, I think that you hit upon something that is a big part of it. Is I tell everyone there is no one way to do a business, but there are some things. There's one way to do it. There's one way to frame a house, like to safely do it so that it will work, and it will be correct. But the reason there's an infinite amount of ways of doing business is because at the end of the day, there are relationships, and you just hit upon the various things. At the end of the day, if you want to make grandma's recipe for her chocolate cake, there's one way to do it. That's her recipe. But there's a lot of different human elements that go into there. And I think that differentiating those two things are very beneficial for all of us in saying that, there's a human element that can be things different, but there's still at the end of the day, if you're going to do math, 2 + 2 still needs to equal 4. And I think that realizing the difference in the way we teach each other would be tremendously positive moving forward for everyone. So we hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will be with you again next week.